All right, let's talk some edge rushers. I don't know if I'll have too many hot takes in this one. You know I love some hot takes, maybe a couple warm takes certainly, but let's just get into it. Top 7 edge rushers, starting with number 8. Number 8, Von Miller. You're confused. What do you mean top 7 edge rushers starting with number 8? That's not how numbers work, Jackson. Well, I just felt like I couldn't not put Von Miller on this list. There was 8 I felt strongly deserved to be on this list. A couple others I could have, considered as well, but I wanted to put Von Miller on this list, so I decided to go with 8. You also see a couple numbers next to his name, just so you know what those are going to represent for the rest of this video. The first number where he ranked in terms of who got the most pressures. So he got the 31st most pressures in football last year, but he was the 3rd highest rated PFF edge rusher last season. So PFF loved him. Pressures were solid. Pressures are why he's lower, quite frankly, because he didn't get as many pressures. But worth mentioning, only played in 15 games last year, did not play the full 17. So that's part of why that's a little bit lower. And it's also worth mentioning, PFF also takes into account postseason play, which I'm not taking into account in the total pressures category. So because of that, he was really good in this postseason, and that's why I had to put him on the list. And I could have probably put him higher. Again, I thought he was good with the Broncos, but he wasn't as elite as he was once he joined the Rams. And so part of me wonders how much of that was playing on a great defensive line. It's clearly to some degree part of it is him as well, though. And again, such a big game player. He has won a Super Bowl MVP, and had so many sacks in that run. He was fantastic. Had a strip sack fumble in the Tampa Bay game that ended up being a very close game. So many key plays from Von Miller. He has to be on this list. He does. Number 7, give me Rashan Gary. And listen, if you're telling me who's better career-wise, Miller or Gary, obviously I'm choosing Miller. But this is a right now list, and for Rashan Gary, he was incredible last year. I mean, 5th most pressures and 5th highest PFF grade. That's going to get you at least in the top 7, in my opinion. I had to put him on here. Now, the negative against him is we've only seen this once, right? His first 2 years, he wasn't great. This year, he really broke out. But that's also kind of the risk you run when you go out and draft a physical freak who doesn't have it all figured out yet, is it's going to take time to develop. He was a developmental prospect, but he has finally developed, and he's developed into a top 7 edge rusher who played even better than that last year. And if he does it again, he'll probably, continue to climb up the rankings. Number 6, give me Maxx Crosby, one of my original great takes from back in the day, being a big fan of Maxx Crosby. Yeah, I got to brag a little bit about one like that, right? Being a big fan of Maxx Crosby, 4th round pick, ends up being a stud. Feel good about that one. He's been great. He's the 6th best edge rusher in my opinion. 10th most pressures in football, 2nd highest graded PFF player. So a little bit of a disparity there between the actual pressures and the grade itself. And I'm going to assume that a big chunk of that is just like this guy has not had a ton of help around him these past really his entire career with the Raiders. They've had some guys who can perform and play solid, but they could use some more guys, I think is what's fair to say, with Chandler Jones, who say what you want about Jones's run defense at this point in his career, his pass rush should still be effective, so that might allow Crosby to generate more pressures while still playing just as good. Number 5, give me Joey Bosa, a guy who was top 10 in pressures and in PFF grade, and you could argue he could even be higher. You could argue he could be lower because again, 8th and 9th equals 5th. You might be wondering why isn't like Gary better, but if Gary had better, better stats in both of those two categories, shouldn't he be higher than Joey Bosa? To me, the reason why I still put Joey Bosa ahead of him is I've just seen this for so many years with Bosa. I know what I'm going to get with him. I like having a bigger sample size if possible because guys do come out, have one good season, and then fall back down to earth. But I've seen him have so many solid seasons, I'm going to put him at least in the top 5. And at number 4, I'm going completely against that by picking Micah Parsons. So you might be wondering, isn't this a bit of a jump in logic? If you care about small sample size, why put Micah Parsons here? Well, for one thing, he had the 4th most pressures in football and was tied for the 5th best PFF grade. But it's worth mentioning he had the best pass rush grade. The reason why there's an asterisk there is because he was tied for 5th, but A, he didn't actually qualify for edge rushers because he qualified for outside linebacker, so that was an element of it. And also B, he tied for 5th with Rashan Gary, but Gary was 5th by himself because Parsons doesn't count, so that's why it's a little bit weird. But regardless, so why am I putting Micah Parsons here if he's, we don't have the sample size that we have with Joey Bosa. Shouldn't I value sample size over one great year? The reason why I'm not is because his year was so great. He was the, again, best pass rusher in football according to a PFF grade. He still had the 4th most pressures in football, and this was his first year, so there's room for him to grow. He can continue to get better, whereas for someone like Joey Bosa, I do know what I'm going to get with him. I think we've only seen one year of sample size of Parsons, and he's been fantastic. We saw 3 years with Gary where only one of them was great. So that's why I'm gonna lean a little bit towards Parsons. So that's kind of why I changed my logic a little bit with him. To me, Parsons is the exception, not the rule. If you lead the league in PFF grade as a rookie, you know what? I'll worry less about the sample size. But still, because of that sample size, I could not put him in the top 3. Number 3 is someone who I was actually a little surprised with how good their advanced statistics were, even though I knew that they were a great player. Nick Bosa. So both the Bosa brothers make the top 5. Pretty interesting there. He was 3rd in pressures last year. The only 2 guys ahead of him were the top 2 on this list. So I think a lot of people I didn't realize that. If you asked me who was 3rd in pressures last year, I would not have guessed Nick Bosa. So that surprised me, certainly. But, you know, it makes sense when you think about it. He is someone who's gotten a lot of pressures consistently. PFF grade isn't quite as strong, but still 7th best in football. So another guy who we've seen multiple years now of him being successful. So, you know, the more I thought about it, I don't think I had him here. You know, if you asked me a month ago, I probably wouldn't have had him here. But looking at the advanced statistics, looking at his tape, which has always been fantastic, I kind of just felt like I think I got to put him 3rd. I think he deserves it. So there you go. Number 2, give me Myles Garrett. Sorry, Browns fans. Garrett was 2nd best in pressures last year, 1st in PFF grade. Now, his advanced statistics actually, you could argue, slightly edged out who was going to be number 1 on this list and was the best in football last season. You could make that argument. His pass rush win rate, which I think is probably, for my money, the number 1 stat I look for in edge rushers, his was best in football. So I think you can make that argument, but the other guy is just a little bit better. And I made a whole video talking about the difference between TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. I don't need to keep it secret. You know who it is. TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. I made a whole video kind of explaining it. So if you want to hear me get into more detail, you can. But basically, it's just I think TJ Watt has outplayed Myles Garrett in these past 3 seasons, even though you could say Garrett outplayed Watt by a hair last year. But number 1, I am going TJ Watt. Again, also worth mentioning, this is a guy who won Defensive Player of the Year last year. And so if maybe Myles Garrett was a little bit better by advanced metrics, but TJ Watt was still absolutely outstanding and won a Defensive Player of the Year and deserved a Defensive Player of the Year and was fantastic. Had the most pressures in football, 6th highest graded PFF grade. Watt's a better run defender than a lot of these guys on this list. He plays coverage like 50 snaps a year and is always like decent at it. So, which is, you know, more than what you ask for out of an edge rusher. So Watt is, he's a fantastic talent, someone who we all know what he can do. And he's just been so consistently good for so many years that I'm just, again, I'm going to bet on him and bet on the bigger sample size. And that's why I'm going with Watt here. But that's what I think. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this list? What is your tell me, of course, you know, where I'm wrong, why I'm stupid, what you disagree with. Always like that stuff. Also, you know, give me your list. Why not? Because, you know, again, this stuff is interesting. Give me your top 7 list of 8 guys that you think are the best edge rushers in football. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.